Secretary of State Antony Blinken was in Haiti Thursday, meeting with the prime minister and other leaders amid corruption and violence in the country. Blinken is the senior-most U.S. official to visit Haiti since 2015. He's there to support Haiti's leadership, which is struggling to address the gangs that have at times had total control of the capital, leading to thousands of deaths and the displacement of hundreds of thousands. On Wednesday, Haiti declared a nationwide state of emergency in an effort to curb the violence. Marsha Biggs joins us now from Los Angeles. She's a freelance journalist who has been following the ongoing turmoil in Haiti. Thank you so much for being with us. So what are we to make of Blinken's visit, and what does Haiti need most other than, moral support from the U.S.?
Well, what Haiti needs the most at this stage is to secure the country and to end the violence. And the United States has been supportive in that with pledges for the United Nations Security Support Mission to Haiti. And Blinken is in town to meet with, as you said in your intro, the 9 members of the Transitional Presidential Council to discuss some of these corruption problems. 3 of those members have been implicated in corruption scandals. So I think the main problem is the security, but also there is the day after. Once you do get some sort of security in that country, and there is a vision for that, there is discussion of having elections at the end of 2025 and then a handover in February of 2026. Now, this is a very questionable date, but it's still a vision that people are trying to attain. So for that time, the day after, what I think that the Haitians that I've been talking to say that they need from the United States is accountability for this corruption, which is rampant in Haiti amongst the oligarchs and political elites. The stopping of the flow of weapons. There was a report that came out earlier this year that the principal source of weapons in Haiti is the United States. Haiti does not manufacture its own weapons. They get all of their weapons from the United States, from states with lax gun laws that then funnel their weapons via straw purchases through to Florida, and then they're sent on small boats from Florida to Haiti. So these are the main issues. And then I think also aid. The people that I've been talking to about aid say that they would like to see a sort of better vision of the United States aid program in Haiti, specifically in terms of food. There's a lot of food insecurity, and instead of perhaps sending food that is grown in the United States to be trying to shore up the local farmers. At this stage, only 10% of our aid, of the United States' aid, goes towards locally sourced food. So a lot of the people that I've been talking to in that arena for the day after want that to change and want there to be created a more sustainable system in Haiti, so that it's not simply an aid state, which is how it's referred to these days because it requires so much aid, but can actually stand up on its own.
Marsha, before I lose you, on that question of accountability, what does that mean? And does that mean what the U.S. has been contemplating, which is supporting a UN peacekeeping mission to assist the Kenyan-led mission?
So the UN peacekeeping mission is fraught with problems. First of all, the Kenyan-led security support mission is right now underfunded, which is why they're looking to this sort of new way of threading that needle. But a lot of the people that I've spoken to in Haiti say that the Kenyans are actually not joining the Haitian police on the front lines, that they're standing back, that they're ill-equipped, they're not able to actually do the job, and you're seeing that there's really been no impact on the violence. A lot of the police officers are also complaining about the fact that they make about $2,200 a month, whereas the Kenyans make about $1,500 a month. So you have this push-pull between the Kenyans and the Haitian police. So shoring that up with a UN peacekeeping mission may not necessarily address these problems. You also have the issue that the UN is not popular in Haiti. In 2010, they brought cholera to Haiti and killed about 10,000 people, and it remains an epidemic to this day. You also have many sexual abuse scandals. So the Haitians are very reticent of a longer term UN mission in Haiti.